Anita started out straight out of college Alabama University, Roll Tide, and she went to work for the American Bar Association overseas, working in Central Eurasia and European law initiatives. Then she went to work for the Grameen Foundation, which specialized in microloans to poor countries. And then she worked for the OSCE as an election observer in Macedonia. Wow. That was not what I was doing straight out of college, let me tell you. So she, this is a fine example of a woman of passion who was committed to her beliefs. And so she decided in her time in Macedonia she wanted to come back home and looked online and found an ad in the idealist.org. And it was an advertisement for ACORN. And so she interviewed and she got the job. And the rest, as they say, is for history, which she's going to present to us tonight. So without further ado, Mrs. Anita Moncrief. Okay, so, this is like, you're now just standing up and questions are going to start firing. So tell us how you got started with ACORN.
As Catherine was telling you, I was working with the American Bar Association, and I had gone overseas. And at the time, when I came back, I was an unpaid intern. So I'm having $300 lunches with my lawyer friends, and then I'm going home and I'm living in Southeast DC. So I really got to see the difference between rich and poor, and I decided while being overseas was really great and helping internationally, there was so much to do here in the United States. So I was looking for an organization that worked in the communities, that really cared about people, that was out there trying to make a difference. And I came across an ACORN ad. And I applied and I talked to them, and I was very in line with what they were trying to do, helping people, ending poverty, working in the communities. So I took the job and I moved to Washington, D.C. The first thing I found out is that, number one, I wasn't really working with ACORN. I was working with its sister organization, Project Vote. Project Vote is a 501c3 nonprofit. So they were paying me out of this nonprofit tax-exempt funds, but I was still working with ACORN as part of their strategic writing and research department of ACORN Political Operations. If you know anything about ACORN, you know that there's over 300 organizations that are all under that umbrella of ACORN, and it's not just one. When you're out there and you're doing this, all the money is going back and forth. So I thought it was a little weird that I was being paid out of the nonprofit funds, but I was actually still technically working for ACORN. But it got weirder as I stayed there longer.
Got weirder. And so tell us what you saw, what led you to the place where you said enough's enough.
Well, some of my first tasks were researching voter fraud allegations that came out of the 2004 elections. And I started to notice a pattern the whole time that I was doing this, was that in every circumstance, ACORN would throw these employees under the bus. They would say, oh, it was one rogue employee that happened to go out and register Mickey Mouse. We didn't know anything about it. The problem with that is that it was a whole lot of rogue employees. All across the country, they were facing voter fraud allegations in different states. Missouri, they had 9 people that went to jail for ACORN while they ran out scot-free ahead of prosecution and blamed those folks. Some of these folks were people of bad character. And one of the things that they did was they hired people of bad character because they knew it would be easier to blame it and say, oh, he's a lazy crackhead, it wasn't us. So they would do that on purpose, and I started to notice this pattern. It was really disturbing, and I contacted a group called the Employment Policies Institute. They run a site called RidenAcorn.com. If you look at it, they've been yes, and they've been tracking ACORN voter fraud for years. So I contacted them, and a guy named Brett Jacobson told me that, I admire what you're doing, but I just had a baby, and you're still working at ACORN, and you should probably wait and get away from the organization before you start whistleblowing. He said, I could probably pick your brain right now, but I don't think it's safe for you. So I stayed at ACORN, and I kept seeing different things. I was looking where the money was coming from. You had people like the Rockefellers, Ford Foundation, Vanguard Charitable Trust, Tides Foundation. A lot of these companies that are foundations that are getting tax credit were turning around and funding these ultra-liberal programs. And some of their money was coming in under the table. Wire transfers with no type of like when you give a donation, there's some type of document that comes with it. No, this was just money going straight into ACORN's account, and their bank is Whitney National Bank, and that's what I was telling her about. It operates as a mob bank. They take care of SEIU, ACORN, and ACORN and Project Vote actually own stock in that bank. So I started seeing all of these different bank accounts. There were over 300 of them, and it just didn't add up. The money was coming from somewhere, and it wasn't going back to help the people. Hardly any of that money ever went into the communities. It was all for political work.
And so when did you reach the point where you earned the title of the whistleblower? How did that actually happen?
Well, that happened after I left the organization. In 2008, I had been working with them, still volunteering with the local ACORN groups, because I still believed in it, but I was working at Grameen Foundation at the time. And what I came into the office one day, and I was hanging out there helping do signs and flyers, and sometimes the head organizers that they hire are not trained very well, so I was doing the newsletter for her. And she goes, "Hey, I want you to come out with me on this protest." And I said, "What is it?" She goes, "We're going out to protest the Carlisle Group." The Carlisle Group is I don't know if some of you have heard of it, but it's, equity funds and very big business. The Bushes are actually affiliated with it, and so they wanted to kind of go after them. And I said, "Why are you going after the Carlisle Group?" And she told me it was because SEIU was paying the DC local ACORN $5,000 to turn out protesters in front of David Rubenstein's house. They wanted to go to his house, harass his family, and terrorize him to get a contract for SEIU. So I looked at the rap. The rap is what they call what you tell people when you go out and door knock. And the rap was, "Aren't you tired of these rich white people coming into your community and they don't give you any money? Aren't you mad about it? Don't you want to go out and do something about it?" Rounding up the people to go protest in front of someone's house and scare their family. And I said no. And I took a copy of the SEIU contract with me when I left. And that was the last time I worked with ACORN on anything. And when I found out about the embezzlement scandal that the New York Times reported on in July of 2008, I contacted that reporter because I had documents and information that would let them know that it wasn't just embezzlement. It was a host of other tax violations, FEC violations, money laundering, and something that would be RICO if people were investigated, that they had enough for RICO charges.
So you started out and you went straight to Washington, D.C., and you had an opportunity to participate in the hive mind there at ACORN. So you saw all the backroom operations and the money flow, and you got to see it. So one of the things that I think is important that we recognize is not only the money flow and who's calling the shots from the top down, but also what they're really doing on the ground. How does community organizing in the ACORN sense of the word, because I think that's become an overused phrase, community organizing. When you are inside the walls of ACORN, what does it mean to be a community organizer?
It's totally different from the way they portray it. They portray community organizing as this great thing where they go out and they door knock and get the people involved and they go out to meetings and stuff, and that's part of it. But that's only ACORN on the surface. That's what they use to get people to give them money and to use the poor blacks to say, "Look, we're organizing poor black people. This is good. Give us money." And that's what they do. What they were really doing is going out into these communities, lying to the people, and getting them to protest for things that they wanted. They wanted to sue Sherwin-Williams, the paint company, because they wanted money, and they wanted Sherwin-Williams to give them millions of dollars. So they got everyone involved, and I have documents that show this, and I actually printed it on my website, AnitaMoncrief.blogspot.com. If you guys ever want to go there, just search Sherwin-Williams, and you'll see these documents. Sherwin-Williams was willing to get the lead paint out of these poor people's houses. They said that they would go in and get the paint out, but ACORN said no, because they wanted a monetary settlement in the millions of dollars given to the organization. But they had fooled people into taking off time from work, getting child care, and going out there with protest signs that they made up for them. Professionally made signs, T-shirts and everything, getting the lead out Sherwin-Williams and protesting in front of these buildings. And they never knew that Sherwin-Williams had already agreed to get the lead out. But it wasn't enough for ACORN.